Tarry here, where the stories never grow old, and you hear something new every time they are told, and it comes clear. So tarry here, where it doesn't matter your age, and when we gather round the table, we all take the stage year after year. So tarry here.
Welcome to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stash Ilkowski.
And I was trying to remember the date while I said my name, and I almost got in trouble there. Today is Monday, May 12th.
Yeah, how about that?
2025. And our story theme today is Stories Children Tell. I'm really looking forward to this. I think we're going to have some excitement, especially looking forward to your story, Stash. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Here I am. My wife is out this morning to a political kind of meeting. We're involved in a thing called Indivisible.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I'm hoping they don't. I want to be part of this group, but I'm hoping they're not going to keep meeting on Monday. This is the first meeting of the local group, and so I told Terry when she went out to the car, I said, "Make sure you tell them not to have the meetings on Monday." So,
because that's when we record the radio show,
right? So anyway, and we're just plugging along. Terry had a birthday on Thursday. She celebrated by not leaving the house. And we had talked about going to dinner or something and all that, but she said on Wednesday night, she said, "I'm not doing anything on my birthday. I'm not leaving the house." Turned out that she worked a lot at the house doing things because our basement got flooded.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Terry is married to an old man who's practically useless. So she wound up cleaning up the basement. I don't even go down in the basement because of the steps and all that. And but we have a nice wet, dry back that she was able to use. Quite a few gallons of water that she had to then carry up the steps and dump out on the outside. And but she was happy to, she got a lot of stuff done on her birthday, and she was happy to stay home. And lately, we've been doing a lot of that. Saturday, we didn't go any place, and Sunday, we didn't go any place. And of course, that catch up with us. When she gets home from this meeting, we have a number of things to do, run some errands and stuff. And anyway, that's my story.
Basement?
What?
How's your basement? Did you get a lot of
water? Well, it's dried out after she got the water off the floor. We had a couple of fans she set up, and we have a guy coming today to clean out the gutters on the house because the day of the flood, Terry noticed water looking out the kitchen window that we had a big storm. Water was pouring out of the gutters, on the roof gutters, and she could see that. So she called a man. We have a family that does our lawn for us, and they're really good people. And she called him and asked him if he would come and clean out the gutters because that's a problem with, when water pours over like that, it's right against the house. And this house has windows on two sides down low.
Yeah.
Basement windows. I don't know why people have basement windows. don't understand it, doesn't make sense, I would never have them, but when water pours off the roof, all those windows have holes dug, like a foot and a half deep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so the water just pours in there and then it goes, through the cracks, and not cracks, but leaks into the
Foundation.
basement.
Yeah. So you
So
expect the problem is now fixed.
I hope so. They're not here yet, but they said they would be here. And so we're just hanging out.
Okay.
Thursday, I'm going to my daughter's school where she teaches Spanish because she for the school fundraiser she offered a math and science lesson with her dad and an eighth grade student and her parents. Um, they bought it or whatever you call it. When you have they paid to have that. So on Thursday, I'm going down to Westminster with Terry's going to take me down, and I've got two boxes of science stuff, and I'm going to, do some science and tell some stories.
So you'll have stories for us when you come back.
Yes, yeah,
radio.
Yeah, because I'm not sure what it's going to. My daughter I told my daughter to tell this girl she could bring some friends if she wanted, because it's going to be after school for an hour to an hour and a half, and I said, if she wants to bring some friends, and I'm sure her mother will be there, you know. Anyway, I'm just going to take some stuff that I've done in a classroom, and when I've told stories and science stories and demonstrated stuff.
Oh, I wish I could be there.
Yeah,
That's my favorite thing, to sit in on your science classes.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask Terry. Terry will be there, of course, because I don't go anyplace unless Terry's there.
Right.
Since I don't drive, and so I'm hoping that I'll ask Terry if she'll take some videos.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
And
I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a new math thing. I'm going to introduce this girl to a new math thing that I discovered. I didn't discover, but I learned about it, and it is, kept me busy for days and days. I last night I tore up all the sheets I was using to practice this math thing. There's some guy from India, a mathematician from India, found this interesting thing that happens with 4-digit numbers. And I came across it just looking, this about a month ago. I came across it, and then I just looked at it again about 10 days ago, and I have spent hours and hours on it. It's so fascinating. So anyway, it turns out that if you take 4-digit numbers, like 1, 3, 5, 7, and then you do this special thing with them, which is not that devious. Take it like 1, 3, 5, 7, and you write that as the biggest number it can be using those numbers. So that would be 7, 5, 3, 1. And you subtract from that the smallest number you can write, 1, 3, 5, 7. All right.
So far.
Okay. And you get an answer. And then you take that answer and do the same thing. All right. Write you'll get a 4-digit answer. And so you write the 4-digit answer as the largest number it can be, and subtract it from the smallest number it could be using those 4 numbers. Well, it turns out you can't do that more than 7 times before a constant shows up. the same
Wow.
number. Okay. And sometimes it shows up immediately.
Huh.
And so I've done a whole bunch of those, you know.
I would love to know the process he went through to come up with that formula.
This is, this is a guy who just,
Plays
a
with numbers.
mathematician who played with numbers. And because of it, it got me, and I really like that. Numbers are a big deal to me, you know,
Yeah.
and
I
especially,
I really hope that Terry can record what the kids say.
yeah. Well, I'm going to have them do it.
I know. That's what
I'm
I
going to have them
mean.
do
I
it,
want to
and
hear
I'm
the
not going to
kids.
tell them. I'm not going to tell them what happens. I'm going to have them do it on some numbers, and say, okay, what do you think?
Right.
And
I want to hear those conversations. That would
yeah,
be
and
amazing.
so, and it turns out that it also works for three-digit numbers. Um, and it gets a different answer all the time.
Hmm.
A different answer than the four-digit number.
A different constant.
Yeah, different constant. Excellent. And so, you know, and I'm hoping, my daughter told me that this eighth grade girl is an excellent student, in all subjects, that she's one of the best students in school. And of course, she'd have to be in order to want to spend it, have an extra class after school. But I'm looking forward to it because, it's one thing to do that for a library or a school group of kids who are dragged into their, saying, "Oh, we're getting a storyteller today." They're stuck. Some of them are happy. Most of them are happy.
Right.
But this girl apparently really likes learning. So, um, that's my kind of kid.
Yeah, that's
So,
great. Okay, I did want to say thank you to Andy Alfred for opening our program this morning with his song Tarry Here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Andy. And we're looking forward to having Andy come and tell stories at Stories in the Round in July. And of course, this now is an opportunity for me to say that in May, on May 26th, we'll have the Antietam Storytelling Guild
oh
telling
boy,
stories at Stories in the Round, featuring the wonderful, the amazing, the what's that word?
I hate to think.
Enthusiast Stash Zilkowski,
Oh,
Mr. Z.
yeah. Well, I'm looking forward too because this time I am going to tell a liar's tale.
All right,
You
good.
know, and,
And I
and
know it will be astounding.
and the one I'm going to tell is partly because you said you ought to tell that.
I think you should. Well, I don't
I
remember what I said, but
I just
I'm glad
I
you're
just
going to do it.
mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and I
Okay.
thought, you know what? I think I will tell it because that's a good story.
All right. Well, if people want more information, if our listeners want to know more about that presentation on the 26th of May, they can call me at 301-730-1638, and I'll tell you how to get tickets.
All right,
It's going to be amazing.
right. And tomorrow is a big day for the Speak Story series,
It is. It's a wondrous day.
right? And
Highlight of the season.
I'm going to do my best to get there.
All right. Well,
I
maybe we may be there too.
could,
Because
yeah.
and I'm
I haven't seen anybody in person in the last 2 years, I guess, except
yeah.
Adam.
Mhm.
And since Adam Booth is telling tomorrow, I'm going to do. Terry intends to take me, and that'll be good.
Yeah.
Um,
Looking forward to seeing you then.
yeah, and yeah. So speakstoryseries.com, 7:30 tomorrow evening, and you should go to the website speakstoryseries.com and get all the information. And it's going to be in the church at 100 Washington Street in Shepherdstown, which is a great facility
It is a
for
fun.
stories, and that's the home of Speak Story series now. So,
Okay. Looking forward to seeing you and Adam tomorrow
yep,
evening. Okay. You want to tell a story?
I do, and I want to say I hope you had a nice Mother's Day.
I did.
Good,
Low key, but it was fun.
good. Right now, I know I don't. I'm not going to say why on, but people on the air just ignores. I wish I had just taken a picture of your screen.
Oh, because that's
Because
the birthday boy in the background. It was also his birthday yesterday.
yes.
So we had
Oh, tell him I say congratulations on another time around.
yeah. At this stage of our lives, every year
Well,
is a bonus, right?
oh, you bet. Just incredible. And yeah.
Okay, so
So
our theme, children, I mean, stories children tell.
okay.
You're
I
going to
hope
pick a
you're
story.
going to like this. This is a I approached this in a different way. I kept thinking about it. And then I remembered, um, you know, a thing I did with some storytelling when in Reisterstown. Um, I, a kid in one of my classes um, raised his hand and said, "How come storytellers are all old?" And I said, "Well, I was going to say no, they're not all old," but he said, "You're old." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know what? You're right. There aren't very many young storytellers." And I said, one of the things that some people do is try to get youngsters to tell stories. And there are clubs in different places around. And I know some storytellers that I told this young man. I said, I know some storytellers that actually begin storytelling groups. Storytellers that work as a teacher and that. And I said, and he said, "Well, why don't you do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm too busy doing other things." I said, I coach and I do a lot of theater and I do storytelling. And I think if I added one more um, group activity to my schedule, I'd wind up being a bachelor. And the kid was funny. He said, "But you're married." I said, "Yeah." Do you get that reason there? My wife is about at the limit of you know of me being involved in things, especially starting new things. So that was quite a while ago, and since when we moved, the last time we moved, I promised Terry I would not start anything. so but what I did suggest, I said to this young man, why don't you learn some stories and you tell the stories? And at first he didn't say anything, but then a while later he came back to me, stopped in my class, not during the class, he stopped in during the day in my classroom and said, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a storyteller." And I said, "Well, good for you." And I said, "Well, what kind of stories are you going to tell?" And he said, "This was funny because I don't know if this is allowed or not." He said, "But there are lots of stories and that, like you mentioned, Hans Christian Andersen stories, stuff like that." He said, "So," and I checked with the librarian, and she said, "You can tell stories that somebody else wrote, as long as they're not, like in a modern times, you'd probably have to ask if it was a storyteller from, that visited your school and that. But stories that are in something like Hans Christian Andersen or other kind of books, you can look in the book and it might say, okay, these stories can be retold, you know, and because some of them don't have any author, they're old stories been collected. So, and he did tell a story in my class. And I asked him if he wanted to try it, and he did. He was a little bit nervous, but he tried it. So I'm going to do tell from his point of view. He told this story, and he had a little bit of trouble because he had to change the some of the characters. So once upon a time, there was a homeless boy, and he lived in a cardboard box in Baltimore City. And one day, there was this strange woman passing by, and she stopped and tapped on the top of his cardboard box, and he poked his head out, and she said, "Why are you living in the box?" And he said, "Well, I'm homeless. I don't have a family anymore." And she said, "Well, that's terrible." And he said, "Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it?" I said, "I really hate living in this box because sometimes people aren't nice, But um, maybe someday I'll be able to I'll live in a house." And this lady turned out to bet she was like a wizard or something. And she said, "You know what? I want to tell you something. Tonight, when you go to bed or go to sleep, because I don't even know if you have a bed in that box, I want you to turn around 3 times, shut your eyes, go to sleep, and in the morning you'll see what you see." Well, so he did that. And in the morning, he woke up and things were strange. He wasn't inside of the box. He he was in a house. And he walked through the rooms and he was looking around. He he couldn't believe it. He was in a house. And he thought, wow, it's like magic. And he went to the front door of the house and walked out. And there was a mailbox with his name on it. So he was very happy. So a few days after that happened, the same person came by, knocked on his door, and said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm doing fine, and I really like this house, and it's really nice. The trouble is, I'm all alone here. This is just like being on the street, and I kind of wish this house was in, like some of the houses in other parts of the city where, there's neighbors and stuff." And so the woman said, "Okay, tonight when you go to bed, turn around 3 times, close your eyes, go to sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you will see what you will see." Well, he did that. In the morning, he woke up. He didn't think anything was different. He's still in his house, but he walked up out to the front door, and when he opened it, looked, his house was on the street with other houses. And there was somebody in the yard next door, and he went outside and talked to this person, and he was really happy. But some time went by, and he thought, wow, this is wonderful. But I wish I was in a better house. And he just went on with his life. One day, this lady showed up again, knocked on the door and said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm doing fine, and I appreciate everything I have, except that it makes me think that I'd like something better. I'd like to have a nicer house than this, and I like to have. I wouldn't mind having. I was reading a story about people who had servants, and somebody take care of them and fix their food. I think that would be pretty nice." Oh. The woman said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you what. You go to sleep tonight. You roll over 3 times, turn over 3 times, and go to sleep. And in the morning when you wake up, you will see what you will see. Well, this went on a number of times. And what happened was this boy who had been homeless, instead of being really grateful for what this woman was doing for him, he got like he wanted more and more. And the next time he saw her, it was quite a while because he was living now in a really nice place. So she stopped by and said, "How are you doing now?" And he said, "I like very much, but I think I ought to live in a like in a palace or something and have some servants." She kind of just smiled and looked at him and said, "Well, tonight when you go to sleep, turn over 3 times, go to sleep. And in the morning, when you wake up, you will see what you will see." Well, woke up in the morning, he did not recognize where he was. Got up, put on some clothes, walked in outside the room he was in, and discovered that he was in a palace. And there were people there who were asking him what did he want for breakfast, and somebody was cleaning out the fireplace, and they were treating him like he was very special, and he really liked it. Well, some months went by, and the lady showed up again and knocked on the gate, and a guard let her in. She went up to the house and she said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Just fine, just fine. But you know what? I think I'd like to have an even better place. And what I would like to do is I'd like to be somebody really important." And the woman just kind of sighed and she said, "Well, who?" And he said, "Well, I'd like to be the Pope." And she said to him, "Okay, well," and told him the same thing. "Tonight, when you go to sleep, turn around 3 times and go to sleep. And in the morning, when you wake up, um, you will see what you will see." And he was excited because he didn't know too much about being a pope, but he said that would be wonderful. So he did. He went to sleep. He turned over 3 times, fell asleep. And in the morning, when he woke up, he was really surprised. When he sat up, thought he was in bed, he hit his head on the top of a cardboard box. He never saw that woman again, but he did learn a lesson.
Wow. What was this boy's first name? Who wrote
This guy, his
Yeah.
name was Alan.
Alan.
Yeah,
What a story. And
yeah.
how old was he?
He was 13. He was in one of my freshman classes, freshman science class. General science. And I thought it was very creative. He told me that he had gone to the library and found a book of tales, and he asked the librarian to go look at it with him and see whether he could tell stories from that book. And she suggested to him, "Well, you can use it as a, like a, framework or something, but said just to be on the safe side, so you're not accused of taking somebody's work, um, you know, make it different enough." And he told me that he made it different enough. And it was a charming story and had a nice ending where, you know, the the person got too greedy and paid the price. So I have,
We should send that to Chenga Zalko.
oh yeah, you think she would like that?
Folk tales, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah.
Oh, well, listeners, you've been attending to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour, using up your time today, listening to stories that children tell. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stas Ziolkowski.
And we're going to move on with another story. And I'll tell you where this story comes from at the end of it. This story is called Pets for Pam, and it was written by a 9-year-old. Chapter 1, The Turtle. One day, a girl named Pam was walking home from school. As she walked, she looked in a pet shop window and saw a tank of turtles. One looked at her. She looked back at him. He smiled at her. She smiled back at him. She ran home as fast as she could and ran up the stairs as fast as she could. When she got to her house, she rang the bell. Her mother opened the door. The first thing Pam said was, "Can I have a turtle, Mom?" Her mother said, "No." But Pam said, "No buts." Her mother said, "We have no money to spend on a good-for-nothing turtle." Pam ran to her room. Chapter 2, A Job. The next day, Pam woke up with an idea. She would get a job, but what kind of job? She didn't know. As she was thinking, she heard a voice, and the voice came from her mother. "Come on, Pam, you'll be late for school." "I'm coming," said Pam. After she ate breakfast and got her clothes on, she was on her way to school. At least that was what her mother thought. Actually, she went around town looking for a job. West? No. East? No. South? Yes, a little job, but a job. 10 cents an hour, mother's helper, said the sign on the door. She went in. "May I come in?" she said. "I have come to fill the job." "Why, you look less than 5 years of age." "I am 10, said Pam. "Well, what do you know about babies?" "A lot." "How many children were you planning to have me take care of?" "Oh, only one. Her name is Trouble." "Why do you call her Trouble?" "You will find out tomorrow at 5:00 a.m. Chapter 3, The Meeting. 5:00 the next day, Pam ran out of her house. Her mother heard her and said, "Pam, is it 8:00 already?" By the time her mother got up, Pam was 2 blocks away. By the time Pam got there, it was 5:30. She knocked on the door. A little girl about 4 years old answered the door and said, "Come in, I've been waiting for you. Sit down, please." "Are you Trouble?" said Pam. "Of course not. My name is Small. I'm Trouble's sister. She'll be down soon." "Well, how old are you?" asked Pam. 7, the girl answered. "Here comes Trouble." Trouble came down the stairs. Thoing! "Father's tore up your pillow again," said Small. Trouble did not say anything. All she did was walk down the stairs. Chapter 4, The Day Begins. Small said, "This is your new babysitter." And then Pam said, "Hi, my name is Pam." But Trouble did not answer. All she did was walk down the stairs. "Well, I'll have to be going," said Small. So Small went out and slammed the door behind her. Pam said, "Would you like to go up to your room and show me some of your things?" Trouble did not answer. All she did was walk up the stairs. A couple of minutes later, Trouble came down the stairs and went into the kitchen. Pam said, "I don't know why her name is Trouble. She's really nice." The next minute, Pam ran into the kitchen. You should have seen the mess. Eggs on the floor, sugar on the table, chocolate syrup on the plates, broken cups and saucers. Pam almost fainted when she saw the mess. How could a little girl make such a mess by herself? Well, Pam found out. Well, she did not quite. Out of one of the hunks of dough came a little black and white skunk. Then Pam sent Trouble up to her room and told her to get rid of the skunk. Pam cleaned up. It had been 5 hours already. 50 cents, 10 cents an hour. She wished the parents would come home soon. She had enough money to buy the turtle. Around 6 hours later, the parents came home. I hope she did not give you any trouble, said the mother. No, said Pam, not a bit, hiding the skunk under her skirt. It was 9 o'clock already. Wouldn't her mother be worried? She didn't have time to buy the turtle. And when she got home, her mother said, What took you so long? Well, I helped the teacher clean up, said Pam. Chapter 5. The Next Pet. The next day, Pam woke up and went to school. After school, she went to the turtle shop. She had $1.10, and the turtle was only 20 cents. Well, as she went into the pet shop, she noticed a kitty in a little cage. It did not look very happy either. She went over to it, and it started meowing. Then the cat grabbed her arm softly. This was a problem. It was $1.20, and she wanted the turtle too. Maybe I'll work again. Not with trouble. So she went over and bought the turtle. She brought it home and sneaked it into her room and fed it, and it seemed very happy. Chapter 6. The next day, she did the same thing she'd done the other day. She went out looking for a job. On her way out, guess who she met? Trouble and her parents. Though Trouble instantly said, Hi, Pam, nice to see you again. Yes, Pam, our child told us what fun you two had. We'll raise the price to $1 per hour. Well, I'm sure. Well, we knew you'd be glad to start at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Later, Pam's parents followed her to Trouble's house and found out what she was doing. And then they decided to take her to the country since she wants to see animals. And they go to the country to her aunt's house, and she falls in love with the animals, especially the horse. And the aunt dies, and in her will, her aunt left her the farm and all the animals to Pam. So her family moved to the farm and lived happily ever after.
Wow.
Pretty good for 9 years old, isn't it?
Wow. Yes. Yes.
So there's no name given for that little girl, but the story comes from a 300-page book called The Folk Stories of Children by a man named Brian Sutton Smith. This book was given to me by storyteller Susan Gordon. It's a publication of the American Folklore Society, edited by Marta Weigel. And there are 6 other collaborators besides Brian Sutton Smith, but none of them are familiar names to me. David M. Abrams, Gilbert Borvin, Malou Caring, Daniel Gildesgame, Dan Mahoney, and Thomas Stevens. And it's dedicated to Alan Schwartz. I don't recognize that name either. So I need to do some research and find out how this book came about. It's a project, a grant project from the National Institute of Education, published in 1981. By that organization I just mentioned. And the stories are all from children ranging from age 2 to age 10. And they are all quirky and delightful and weird. But I've only just started reading it. So you'll probably be hearing more
Wow.
of those stories. And I might even tell some of them from the stage if I can attribute them to the book. Most of the stories have children's names attached to them, but no more information than their name and their age and the year.
I'll be darned.
So
Well,
most of them were
that was
collected in the
interesting.
70s, but it wasn't published till 81.
Oh,
Isn't
boy.
that an amazing book? Wouldn't you like to get paid for collecting children's stories? Wouldn't that be
Oh
fun?
my God. You know what I think? I thought about this. This is off the subject, except it is about stories. Is every night Terry and I, when we go to bed, um, we settle down and Terry turns on a thing called Calm or something, and it has stories to put you to sleep. And and some of them work really nice. Well, just recently there was the stories that the story we listened to was um, uh, voicemails from my mother, and it was uh, very interesting. There were about 15 voicemails in a row, and the woman would, I mean, whoever recorded these would like touch the button on the phone and it would be, hi, this is mom. I just wanted to call, let you know I was thinking about you. Bye. And it went on and on. Each of them got more detailed and a little bit wacky and crazy, but it was very well done. And I thought, I've been thinking this for a while. If you and I, um, if we could find some good sleepy time stories and make a recording, we could probably put that someplace like a podcast. 15-minute stories, but to put people to sleep. And it's a little bit crazy, but
We can do it on the radio show.
I know, but then that gets mixed up with with John's whatever thingy, whatever
You
John's
mean it
doing,
wouldn't be at bedtime?
huh?
You mean it wouldn't be aired at bedtime?
Oh no, it would have to be available to people in a different way, like a podcast stuff. But it would
I
have to
think we
be,
should, I think we should do that and do it as a as a regular radio show, but then advertise it and tell people, like hand out little flyers to all of our story audiences and tell them how to get right to that program so they can
yeah.
play it at night.
As long as, that would be an interesting thing to do, as long as it was dedicated strictly for sleep time,
Yes.
nothing else.
Yeah. Sleep time stories.
Yeah.
We have a new project.
Okay. So, because some of them are travel logs that and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And
So is this recording that you listen to, is it the actual mother's recordings?
no, it's somebody. I don't know. It might be somebody collected, but it's part of this sleep story stuff.
Okay.
And and every one of them is individual. And there are some people who are, I think famous people. Like, I don't know if you know the name Alan Sklar. He
Yeah, it
was,
sounds familiar.
yeah, and he's some. But some of them don't put me to sleep. Some of them they have instead of like you know relaxing stuff. It's you have to pay attention.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it wakes you
And
up.
and that gets, for me anyway. It's like and
I
and
love it.
but anyway, it's kind of interesting. So we should think about it as a project.
Yes, we're definitely going to do that.
All right. So um, let's see. I'm looking. We've been on the air for 45 minutes.
I know. So you have time for another story.
Okay, I have a time. This is actually a personal story, and it's um, I've been I've told stories in I never told stories in a high school that I taught in, except in my classroom. I
Right.
never. Now, I taught in two different elementary schools, one for 6 years and one for 3 years. The rest of my career was 31 years in high schools. So in elementary school, uh, for both of those schools, one was a very expensive private school, um, and but I was able to tell stories in the auditorium for more than just my science students, um, and but I had occasion to teach in a very small elementary school, and I joined there. I retired from the public school system and joined this elementary school in their second year. And during their first year, I took off a lot of Fridays from the public school because I had a lot of time I could do that. Um, get a substitute there, and I would go to this elementary school because I was already hired for the next year because I would be retired, and this would be a new job. Um, and I went there so that the kids would get used to seeing me because I would be by far the oldest teacher, and I helped out. I helped out with a couple of different classes. Well, when I finally started working at that school, um, I did some storytelling um, in different classes since I was doing science, and I was doing all the subjects except English, and so I would do some things. But the kindergarten teacher, who was a lovely lady, very very nice lady, and I had gotten to know her from theater because she had a son that was in theater, and we had been in shows together. Anyway, she asked me if I would come and tell stories in her classroom. She said I had told the stories a couple times for the school, and in that year the school had 68 or 69 students, and from kindergarten to sixth sixth grade. So some of the classes had 5 students. Um, but she said, my kids have a hard time being in the mob. You know, I try to teach them things about how to behave in an audience and stuff, and they get a little excited, but then they're afraid to do anything because they see the bigger kids aren't as excited as they are. So she said, would you consider telling my kids some stories in our classroom? And she had a small group. I think there were seven kids, and this was in my first year there, and she had new kids each year. I was only at that school for 4 years, I think, 3.5, 4 years. Anyway, I went in there, and I thought on the spur of the moment, I thought that the day I was going to go and do it, um, and I was only going to do it for a half an hour to see how it would work in there. So, I went in and I took my puppet Juan Carlos with me, who is a coyote, and it's really a very nice puppet that I bought years and years ago in Arizona. And so I just tell you what happened about the first time I was there. I went in, and the kids were. Juan Carlos I don't know if you've ever seen my puppet, Juan Carlos. but I should have had it here in there. It's in the bedroom. It looks very much, like it sits on their bed. It looks very much like a, a, a dog or a coyote. It's a gray kind of, and nice, but it is a puppet. Well, I went in and I pulled Juan Carlos from behind a little chair, like that was covered with a cloth, and introduced him to the kids. And I learned this from a puppeteer who I admired, who came to a school and in Baltimore, came to this private school and told stories. And I said, I was so amazed. I got to spend time with him after his performance. He ate lunch with the, in the dining room with us. And I said, I just so amazed how the kids ignored you and talked to the frog. He had a frog puppet, and he said, he said it is the most amazing thing. I've been doing this for many years, and he said even adults do that. I said I found myself doing it. I said I was listening to the frog. I didn't even care what you were doing, And he was sitting in a chair with the frog like on his leg, and and he said the amazing thing about it is if you make any connection with the audience and the puppet. And he said, and he said, I actually studied this. He said he took classes in puppeteering and in ventriloquism. And he said he gave up trying to do ventriloquism because he couldn't do it. He said it just was too messy for him. So anyway, he said it to him, the first time he realized it, it was amazing. He didn't even have to pretend that he wasn't the one talking, So I went into the class, and I had Juan Carlos with me, and I told a little story, a little Cinderella story, and it was very short. It was about 4 minutes or so, just a little thing about a princess and the castle and everything. And these kids were sitting on the floor in front of me, and the teacher, instead of having me on a chair, she had me on a very low stool with a cushion. So I was not on the floor, and I was above the kids a little bit, but I was very close with them. And so I told the story, and this one at the end, and the teacher had told them that when the story's over, don't forget. And she said, "Mr. Z finished the story with Juan Carlos. So what do you do?" And they applauded, and which was good. She was teaching them about how to behave. And this one little girl raised her hand, and I said, "Hi," and she said, "Can I talk to Juan Carlos?" I was like, the teacher was, this is a small room. I actually about as big as the room I'm in here. And the teacher was against the far wall, which is only like 10 feet from me. And I was against the other wall. She had everything she could do to control herself laughing because this kid was serious. She didn't want to talk to me. And I said, well, what are you going to say to him? She said, I just want to ask him a question. And so I said, well, sure. And I just went with it. And she looked at Juan Carlos and said, was it hard to learn that story? So I just, I went on with it. I said, no, I had to practice a lot. And, before I left that morning, all 7 of those kids talked to Juan Carlos. And I was just flabbergasted, It was just wonderful. I think it's one of the best experiences I ever had working in a classroom and in storytelling. Um, you know,
Wow.
it really was something. I mean, it was, and I went into that room pretty uh, wary of how I was going to, you know, have Juan Carlos tell this story and keep their attention and everything. I had visions of the kids getting up, walking away, or but they didn't. They just and uh, those kids sometimes had a train in my room. I think I told you about that before. I had a train platform and everything in my room, and sometimes different classes would come down there and ask if at lunchtime if they could see the train run and all. And those kids came in, and Juan Carlos lived in my classroom. On my desk, I had a little thing that was like a I don't know what you could like one of those. I
A
call it like
dog
a
bed?
yeah, like a little bed, you know. And um, when those kindergartners walked in, the first time they came in after I did that with Juan Carlos, they all walked over and said, "Hi, Juan Carlos." I was like, "Whoa."
How long did it take them before they adjusted to understanding what it was?
I mean, I only went into their classroom a couple times, during that year, but I don't think, I mean, maybe one or two individuals had really figured it out, but I don't think the rest of them even bothered thinking about it.
Wow.
Juan
You
Carlos
don't
was,
think they just accepted that it was make believe?
they
They were,
might have, but they kept it going.
wow.
I mean, I didn't even have to try. And when I haven't worked with Juan Carlos in a long time, as far as haven't done any, but and I used a different voice, and I didn't try to make it too weird and different. I just used a little bit more throaty voice and everything, but um, I just was amazed at um, you know sometimes I told some people at a family gathering once about that, and some of them thought, "Well, were those kids retarded?" So I said, "No, no." I said it's just that they bought into it right away, um, and I did have I had one of my relatives, a cousin who was there, like an older person, say, maybe you made the puppet believable. And I said, well, I was trying. Sometimes he would look at me, and he would turn his face up to me, and I would interact with him. But I said I was just amazed by the fact that it worked on the children. And I said, when I've done it with older kids, I never had a problem with kids 10, 11, 12 years old, accepting the puppet in a story. Um, but I didn't see the same thing there because I was in a small group as the younger kids did, the kindergarten kids. Uh, they just, you know,
But they didn't have conversations with the puppet.
not the older kids,
Yeah.
no. But I did have, with older kids, they ask real questions about, um, isn't it hard to pretend that you're talking to the puppet and that he hears you and stuff? And I'd said, yeah, I said time, I spent time in my bedroom in front of a mirror with with the puppet, and that I said because it does take something. But I told him, I said, it's just amazing, and uh, because of that, I've always liked ventriloquists, you know. But because of that, if I turn on a TV and I can find a show that has a ventriloquist, I'll watch it, even if I've seen it a dozen times, because I'm just amazed at that thing. There are some very famous ventriloquists. I watched the talent shows. When America's Got Talent, there was a girl named Darcy Lynn who was 12 years old. Adorable child, really a cute little girl, 12 years old. And she had a rabbit, girl rabbit puppet. And, I mean, it's hard to imagine it unless you see it. But, and this girl, 12 years old, she could sing. The rabbit could sing. And this girl has a gorgeous voice. And she interacted with that, and she won America's Got Talent, which is a big deal, money. And I have followed her career. Her family, her parents are supported by her career. They travel, they do things, they bought a new home and everything. She is now, I think she's now maybe 21, 22. She's a national performing artist, performs in Europe and stuff. She has done some wonderful, singing with big time guys, on stuff. And I mean, just amazing. And I love to see her because when she's on, I never pay attention to her. I pay attention to whatever puppet she has.
Josh, I am thoroughly enjoying this story, and I have to interrupt you. I don't know if you could see that there was just a fox on our screen, which of course our listeners cannot see, but there was a fox listening to us.
Oh, I couldn't
while
see.
You were talking.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to do this program again. I don't know if you want to do it next week, but we should continue. But we are way out of time.
Oh boy, I
We are
bet.
way over time.
Oh my goodness.
So
We've been on it over 62 minutes.
yes. So
Yeah.
I'm going to sign out.
Okay.
Listeners, you have been oh so patiently listening to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stasi Okowski.
This is the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. We are independent community radio broadcasting from Bolivar, West Virginia, Martinsburg, West Virginia, and Hagerstown, Maryland. Thank you for encouraging us, our listening community.
Right.
I hope you will share, preserve, and expand all of our stories of this community. Stay tuned for John Case up next with
Bobby Weir and the Wolf Brothers.
Wolf Brothers?
Well, he's the last standing member of the Grateful Dead. Founding member of the Grateful Dead.
All right.
Cool.
And I actually like his stuff a lot. I mean, the other band member that went his own way after Jerry died, Phil Lesh, he's gone too now.
Yeah, I just
I mean, we have to salute the passing. What Emily Dickinson?
Who was the leader of that group?
Jerry Garcia.
All right. Okay. I couldn't remember.
He was the best. He was the best known because he was. I know. They were all pretty gifted musicians, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you for both of you for making this show possible. Had a good time.
All right. Take care.
Hey, Fanny, maybe I'll bring Juan Carlos next week.